Hello, and welcome to another episode of Storytime. On today's episode of Stories, we return with episode 2 of our Home Alone Storytime. I know how much you all enjoyed the first episode, so I figured why not? Here's another one. What sorts of experiences will we have? Let's find out together, shall we? And of course, if you haven't done it already, then make sure you have the notifications turned on for my videos. That way, you never miss another episode of Storytime. With that said, let's get on to the video, shall we? Number 1. This was something that happened back in the mid-2000s when I was younger. At the time, I remember it being summer vacation. I spent most of my days alone at home. Considering my parents worked all day, I would usually wake up to the house being empty. Now, for the most part, I did enjoy the peace and quiet, but at the same time, it did get lonesome. There's only so many video games and movies you can watch before you got bored. Anyways, I remember one night in particular. I had invited my friend Abigail over for a sleepover. This wasn't a random Thursday night, but the good thing was it meant I had somebody over for Friday. So, before I get started with what happened, I guess I should describe where I was living. You see, me and my family owned a farm and lived pretty much out in the middle of nowhere. Essentially, if you wanted to get to my house, you would have to go down miles of back roads and farmlands. That's how lonesome it was. Now, the reason I described this was what happened on this day really reminds me of just how quiet it should have been. It was 7 in the morning, and I remember waking up early to see my dad just about getting ready to leave for work. Before he left, he reminded me my uncle was going to come on over in the afternoon. Of course, he wanted me to keep a lookout for him so I could open the door. With that, he wishes me a good day with my friend, and he leaves. For the most part, that morning was pretty uneventful. We made some breakfast, and we proceeded to play some video games. At around noon, we were outside playing in the fields when we can see a car approaching in the distance. I thought it was weird, but I remembered my uncle was coming over today. Well, as it turns out, it was his car. He comes on over and drops some things off, and he leaves about 10 minutes later. Looking back, I wish he would have stayed longer. This is when things begin to pick up. After my uncle had left, we proceeded to go back inside so I could make some lunch for both ourselves and my pet dog. While my friend was eating at the kitchen table, I happened to look out the window. I could notice dust forming down the road. It was still about a mile out from me, but I could tell there was a car approaching. You see, the road to our house was a dirt one. Any time somebody would go up or down that road, you could see the dust trail behind them. I thought it was strange, but then I thought maybe my uncle had forgotten something. If it was my uncle, I figured I would just wait until he knocked on the door. Regardless, I ignore it and proceed to finish making my dog's food. Once done with that, I tell my friend we should go back to the room and finish watching our movie. That's when we ended up going upstairs. Once we were there, we turned the TV back on, and we continued where we left off. Not even 5 minutes later, we hear a very loud noise outside. We both listened in, thinking somebody was knocking at the door. But as we focused even more, it wasn't just knocking. Obviously, it sounded like somebody was kicking at the door, and it sounded like they were trying to break it down. I'm sure if it was my uncle, he wouldn't be doing that. After all, he had a key to the house. It was now my dog started barking, and suddenly he runs into our room looking completely nervous and in shock. That wasn't what got to us. Soon, we hear what sounds like a window breaking, and now we're hearing footsteps downstairs. Quickly and quietly, I get up and make my way to the door. From there, we proceed to stay as quiet as we could. It's now I take the opportunity to look out the window, and now I get a confirmation I've been worried about. I don't see my uncle's car. Instead, I see an unfamiliar darkened van in her driveway. Immediately, I grab the phone in my room, and soon I'm on the line with an operator. While describing our situation, we begin making our way up into the attic, whose entrance was in my room. I remember us just being as still as we could, hoping officers would be arriving soon. I also thought about us climbing out the window, but we were concerned the person or persons might have seen us. Thankfully, in what felt like a long time, but was almost about 5 minutes, we can hear sirens fast approaching. I guess it must have been a slow day or something, because they arrived in record time. Soon, after hearing a bunch of commotion, the lady tells us, "Honey, it's okay. You can go ahead and step out of the room now. It's all over." With that, we make our way downstairs and we find them down there waiting. When all was said and done, it turned out to be a random person. They apparently been getting into other people's homes, and only now he was found. Seriously, any time I look back and think of it, it really gets to me. Even though it happened so many years ago, I still get nervous any time I hear a noise when I'm home alone. I have 2 dogs that keep me company, and they will always make noise anytime somebody approaches my house. I've also installed cameras, and I have a security system as well. After everything, I'm just happy things didn't turn out worse. Number 2. To start off, I'll present you with some background story. This happened about 7 months ago, and at the time, I was living on my own in a small home in a fairly small town. I also owned 2 small dogs who kept me company for the most part. So, it was mid-afternoon around 1, and I was getting ready to go to work. I was working at a coffee shop, and my time to start work was at 3. Normally I worked in the afternoons. This meant I was home during the morning. It was while I was eating a sandwich, my 2 dogs started barking. Annoyed, I tell them to be quiet. I thought maybe the mailman had arrived earlier than normal. Most of the time, he would arrive after I had left. This meant that if I ever ordered something, I would usually have them drop the package off at a neighbor's home. That way nobody would take it. Still, the dogs kept making a bunch of noise, so I thought maybe they needed to go outside. So I get up and open the back door and I let them out. But for some reason, only one of them goes to the back door. The other one goes to the front door and starts barking. Well, it was obvious one wanted to go in the front. That, or maybe somebody was at the front door and they hadn't knocked. Quietly, I opened the curtain in the kitchen and I looked to the front door. You could get a great view of the front door from where I was, so it was a great way to check if I wanted to. Nothing. No one was around. Still, I went to open the door and I met with the still of the afternoon. Everyone in my neighborhood was gone for work, so obviously there was no noise or people. For some reason, my dog didn't even go outside in the front yard, so you can bet I was pretty frustrated with that. But whatever, what can I do? Annoyed yet again, I closed the door and I returned back to the kitchen. I go to finish the video I was watching. Not even 10 minutes later, I'm once again interrupted by my dogs barking and making a big deal about something. I remember taking my earphones off and looking to see where my dogs were making noise. I look over to the living room and I see they were at the back door now. This time, I went ahead and looked through the side window, and now I'm welcomed with a different sight. This time, I can see a man in dark attire and a mask. They're seemingly stumbling around trying to open the door. I got a confirmation of this because I could hear the sounds of the doorknob being messed with. At this point, I'm on the phone, and now I can see him walking over to another house. I continue watching as he now starts trying to open the neighbor's window, and guess what? He actually gets inside. Thank goodness nobody was home at the time. Who knows what he was planning? With this going on, I'm describing everything that was happening. Finally, in what seems like a long time, they arrived and immediately go inside the neighbor's house. Moments later, he's finally taken away and put in the back of the car. Well, as it turns out, this wasn't the first time he had tried to do something like this. Actually, he's had a history of it. At the end of the day, I still was able to get to work all right. But as you can imagine, I was pretty startled about the entire situation. Looking back, I think the dog's barking may have stopped him from getting inside the house. But who knows? Even though this happened over a year ago, I still don't know what exactly happened that night. I think that's what makes this even more worse. For starters, let's get some background context out of the way. Looking to save some money, I'd moved in with some roommates. The neighborhood itself was alright, but that still didn't mean we would be walking around at night on our own. My 2 roommates were a brother and sister, and so I remember this one winter break, they ended up leaving the house to myself. They were going on vacation with their family, and I was left to attend to the house on my own. Sure, it was nice to have the place for myself, but even so, it added that much more mystery. Now, for anyone that's in college, you know that once you're on vacation, your schedule ends up changing. I usually went to school in the morning, and so I was used to getting up at 5 and being at the house before 7. Well, with just 1 week off in winter break, my sleep schedule changed. I guess I could blame all the countless nights I'd stay up and watch movies. Because of this, I remember I'd be up at random times, and sometimes I'd be sleeping throughout the day. Well, this one time it was around 2 in the morning and I was awake watching a movie. I think the lack of sleep finally got to me because I ended up falling asleep halfway through. About an hour later, I'd say around 3:30 a.m., I was awoken to the sound of something falling over. Instantly, I remember getting up surprised by what I just heard. Thinking it was a neighborhood cat that pushed something over, I once again closed my eyes and tried to get some sleep. Moments later, it's the same thing. Annoyed that it could have been a cat, I grab a sandal and make my way outside. The first thing I did notice was the motion light turns on whenever there's movement outside. Well, it was on. This proved that something indeed was in the backyard. I looked around only to notice that my chair that my roommate had there was fallen over. Strange, but I ignored it. Thinking this was all a big coincidence, I stepped inside and finally I got some sleep. The next morning when I finally woke up, it was around 9 a.m. and I go up and throw the trash away. This time, I noticed something different. For starters, the kitchen window was open. Yes, I was pretty tired the previous night, but I know it was closed. And besides, now I was welcomed with the sight of muddy footprints. Seeing that instantly set off alarms in my head. Well, when I got up to open the door, I saw this small cardboard box, and it would look to be photos. Confused, I picked the pictures up. I'm surprised at what I see. In the pictures, I can see photographs of the house, along where I was asleep. In that moment, I was so frozen I had no idea how to begin to understand this. When I finally snapped out of it, I called my roommates. I was thinking it was one of them playing a joke on me. Sorry, but we're not even near you. Actually, we're on vacation in another state. If you want, we can FaceTime you so we can prove it. They ended up doing just that, and I was left speechless. There they were in Florida, spending a wonderful weekend at a fancy resort. Looking back, I wish I was there with them. When all was said and done, I did end up calling it in, but nothing ever came out of it. To this day, nothing like this has happened again, and I truly wonder who it could have been. Yes, I talked to the neighbors, but they all told me it was none of them. One did describe seeing a suspicious person. They said they were in their backyard at night, but they ignored it. Who knows? Any ideas? Number 5. This happened about 3 years ago, when I was living in upstate New York. When this took place, I was 19 years old and still living at home with my mom and my dad. Whenever it was daytime, it would be extremely rare to see anyone around. The only people I would see were normally the security guards, but oftentimes and not, they'd be at the entrance. With that out of the way, let's fast forward to this day this happened. Both my parents worked long hours, and for the most part, they wouldn't arrive until later in the evening. By the time they arrived, it was already dark, so you can imagine just how quiet it was. I figured since it was a snow day, I could take the opportunity to help my parents out. This way, I would go ahead and shovel the snow out of the driveway and even the front yard. That's what I ended up doing for most of the day. Alongside that, I took care of some chores, while also looking after the neighbor's puppy. My neighbors had just gotten a small puppy, so I offered to look after her while they were away on vacation. I mentioned this because she kept me company on this night. Anyways, after a long day, the sunset was just arriving, and I got a phone call from my mom. Hi, honey, it's me. I just wanted to let you know that me and your dad are going to go visit your grandma after work. If you want, we can bring you something to eat on the way back. We should be home later, so make sure you save some appetite, alright? Sounded like a great plan, but it also meant that I was going to be alone for another few hours. Normally when my parents went to visit my grandparents, they would stay there for hours on end. I didn't really want to deal with this. And besides, I had the excuse of looking after the puppy. Moving on. At around 8 p.m. or so, I got up from my room to let the puppy outside. I don't know why, but for some reason when I went downstairs, I got this sudden feeling like I was being watched. I'm not sure, but that was honestly the best way I could describe it. Even so, I just ignored it. I made my way to the back door to let the puppy outside. Once she took care of her business, we proceeded to head inside. As we stepped in there, I'm surprised to hear what sounded like a door closing, and even footsteps. I instantly froze at that sound. Now I was realizing I wasn't the one that done that. Regardless, I was curious about the noise. Now I head on over to the back bedroom where I thought I heard the noise. I checked the back room, and now I noticed the door was closed. Now when I opened it, there was nothing in there. I did see, however, that one of the doors that connects to the living room was wide open. Again, I follow the open door, and I circle back around to the living room. Only this time, I am welcomed with a sight I would never forget. At the door that leads to the basement, I could see what looked to be a man in dark attire making their way down there. Thankfully, they hadn't seen me, but I knew right away somebody was inside the house. Quickly, I decided to head on over to the security guard. While exiting the house, it was now I saw tracks in the snow, which I assumed belonged to this mystery man. As I followed them, I now saw that the window was wide open. My best guess was that's how they got inside. Once I reached the security guard, they call it in, and about 10 minutes later, they all go to my house, but no one. I'm guessing they conveniently left when I exited the house. Whatever. Months went by and nothing came of it. We have since moved away, and I never looked into it more, so I'm not sure if it was found or not. Number 6. This occurred a couple of years ago when me and my cousin bought a small apartment on the far end of town. At the time, I was 20 and my cousin was 18. So, out here there were very few homes. Apart from a small convenience store, it was pretty lonely out here. For the longest time, my cousin, who we'll call Valerie, wanted to move into a place where we could stay together. Growing up, we were like sisters, and we spent so many years doing many fun activities together. It was one of the reasons we chose to move in. Anywho, at the time of this happening, both of us were working at the same grocery store, just at different hours. This would turn out to be one of the downsides to what happened. Well, everything was going fine until I started to notice something strange. Oftentimes at night when I would get up and walk outside, I would notice an unmarked van that would always park on the other side of the street. By this point, me and my cousin had been living here for a few months, and not once had we ever seen that van. Looking back, I remember talking to some of the neighbors, and none of them had any clue whose car it was. Although mysterious, I would ignore it. This ended up happening for about a week. That's until I remember one night I was home alone. It was around 9 p.m., and I recall hearing a bunch of strange noises outside. Thinking it was my cousin, I gave her a call. I was wondering on whether or not she was trying to open the door.
Hey, did you lose your keys or something? What's with all the noise you're making out there? Wait, what in the world are you talking about? I'm still at work. Actually, now that you called, I should tell you that I might be running a little bit late. The boss needs me to stay a little bit longer so we can go over some paperwork. I should be home hopefully before 11 p.m., but I'll let you know.
Alright, well that didn't help at all. What exactly was all the noise I was hearing? I mean, it could have very well been the neighbors, but I remember they were out of town for this weekend. Soon enough, the noises stopped and I began to relax. It was about an hour later. I realized I needed to charge my phone, but I remember I left the charger in the car. Annoyed, I get up and go outside to my car, except now I notice something. Remember that van from earlier? Well, now it was conveniently parked at the front of my house with its lights off. I began to get nervous at the sight of that, but I needed my charger. Against everything, I still go to my car and take the charger out. Once I had it, I quickly make my way inside, making sure to lock the door and double-check the windows. It was now I take a look out the window and I see the van pull away from my neighborhood. Alright, looks like that was the end of it. Honestly, I wish it would have ended there, but it didn't. At this point, it was close to 10:30 p.m., and I began to hear the sound of the front door handle moving. It surprised me for a second, but I thought maybe my cousin was returning home. I remember looking at the door, expecting to see Valerie, but as seconds turned into minutes, I soon realized it wasn't her. With a little bit of time left, I immediately called for help. All the while, I'm hearing all these noises downstairs. Eventually, in what seemed like forever, I see the familiar red and blue lights. Eventually, I stepped outside. That stranger from earlier, well, he was nowhere to be found. This hasn't happened again since. Number 7. This happened last summer break when me and my brother were home alone. I was 20 years old when this took place, and my brother was 12. On this night, my parents had me look after my little brother because they wouldn't be home. My parents were going out of town to visit some old friends, and they left me in charge. Honestly, I didn't mind. It was summertime, and I had nothing better else to do. And besides, me and my brother got along great. Sure, sometimes we did have our sibling rivalries, but then of course, I think that's pretty normal. I mention this because we always looked after each other. At the time, I remember watching TV a lot. There were a lot of stories of people going into other people's homes, but for the most part, this occurred in the town over. Also, this happened in the expensive home, so I thought we would be fine. Little did I know how wrong that assumption would be. Anyways, it was the weekend of me and my brother being home alone, and so far, everything was going according to plan. We spent most of Friday night playing video games and eating pizza, and we were looking forward to another similar day the following morning. I remember it being around 11 p.m., and me and my brother were in the back room right in the middle of a TV show marathon. As soon as I heard a car door close, I realized somebody had arrived. Another way I was able to hear noise was our backyard was full of leaves due to all the wind. Well, sure enough, I began to hear the sounds of leaves being stepped on. I listened closer, but I figured it was just the wind making the noise. I didn't want to make a huge deal about it, so I wouldn't worry my brother. With that, I tell my brother I was going to go to the kitchen and bring us some milk and cookies. Really, it was to go take a better listen to the noise I started to hear. As I made my way down the hallway, I hear a familiar sound. This sound was the noise of the door handle moving. Immediately, I knew something was wrong. For starters, it couldn't have been my parents because I just got off the phone with them. They called to check up on us, but they never mentioned anything about returning early. Quickly, I go back to my brother and I calmly explain what's happening. Slowly, we both make our way over to the living room window and we open the curtains. As we are both taking a look outside, I see what looks like two men trying to break the lock on our door. Luckily for me, I was on the college baseball team, so I grab a baseball bat and me and my brother move to the kitchen. It was now I messaged my mom and dad and I told them what was going on. After that, I call for help while trying to stay as quiet as possible. It's when walking over, I hear a familiar noise. It was the noise of the back door opening. I guess one of us had forgotten to close it or something, because now we heard their footsteps. Next thing I remember was hearing sirens, followed by footsteps running out of the house. Sadly, the two were never found, but we did see all the muddy footprints both outside and inside the kitchen. Number 8. When I was 27 years old, I moved into a small apartment home right outside of Palmer, Alaska. The area was nice, and with there being more nature than people, I never really expected to have anything happen at my home. Now, I did have some neighbors, but most of them used these homes as vacation houses. That's why during the winter months, they remained empty. I guess I was the only one that wanted to stay in the cold, but I liked the cold weather, so I didn't mind it too much. For the most part, I kept to myself as I worked at a coffee shop in Palmer. Every day was pretty much like normal, and I never had anything weird happen. That's until the note appeared. You see, I remember we were closing the shop early that afternoon, and I had returned to my car to get back home. At first, I didn't notice it, but when I got home, I saw there was a little note on the windshield. I know that hadn't been there when I arrived, so I opened it expecting to find a ticket. It's not like I parked in a spot I wasn't supposed to be in, but it was possible. Instead, it was a small note that said, "Hello, I just wanted to say that I really like you. Also, I like your little home. You know, the one that's near the woods. It would be so nice if I could join you there." I'll admit, that did concern me a little bit, and I spent that night keeping a look out my window, half expecting to see a car watching my house. Well, apart from getting no sleep that night, nothing had occurred. When getting to work that morning, I showed the note to my coworkers, but they each said none of them knew about it. Alright, well, this was really weird. My coworker told me to keep a lookout, and if anything, to call one of them. Well, fast forward a couple of nights later. It was around 3 in the morning, and I was watching some television. Suddenly, I started hearing a series of knocking. Now, this wasn't just any sort of knocking. This sounded like it was made in a rhythm, almost like somebody was trying to get my attention. Of course, the first thing I was thinking was, "Alright, come on, it's 3 in the morning. Who in the world is going to be knocking on my door at this time? I mean, come on, seriously?" Even though it was a bad idea, I was still curious about what was going on. So, I walk on over to the window, expecting to see a curious bear or something. No, instead of seeing a friendly bear, I saw this person wearing many layers of dark clothing, and they were just staring at my door. I'm not sure, but I guess he must have heard me because I now heard him say something along the lines of, "Hello, I know you're home. Do you mind opening the door? Come on, it's really cold out here." This was then followed by the strangest laugh I'd ever heard. Now, this wasn't just a laugh when you hear something funny. No, trust me, I knew the difference. "Come on, don't you know who I am? Why didn't you respond back to my note? I even left a phone number there. I just want to be friends, that's all." I still said nothing. I was just hoping he would leave. And after some time, he kicks at the door, and he finally says, "Alright, well, I'll come back tomorrow night. Don't forget me." Once I snapped out of it, I get on the phone and soon I'm explaining the entire situation. As it turns out, I ended up staying over at my friend's house for the next week. When all was said and done, that person was found and taken away. When I found out who it was, I saw it had been a customer who had been following me around for many months when I first started. How he knew where I lived, I have no idea, but I'm glad that's behind us now. Number 9. This is something that just happened a couple of days ago, and I decided I would go ahead and tell you all about it. For some background information, I'm 19 years old, and I'm living on my own in a college dorm. Well, on this weekend, my parents were going on a 3-day weekend road trip and told me to go check up on the house. Even though I had finals to study for, I figured I could do them the favor as a way to take a break from all the reading. Something else I wanted to do was go pick up some old video games from the basement, so I figured I'd do that as well. So, with that, I made the 15-minute drive over. I'm not sure why, but for some reason while driving over there, I'd forgotten my parents were on vacation, so I knocked on the door expecting somebody would answer. Realizing what I'd just forgotten, I made my way over to the back of the house. Looking back, I'm not sure why I just didn't open the front door, but whatever. Once I was inside the house, I felt like something was off. I'm not sure, but do any of you ever get that feeling like you aren't alone? I know it sounds silly, but that's what I was feeling at the time. Disregarding it as my nerves, I go into the basement to go pick up my video games. When I made my way to leave the house, that's when I saw him. In the kitchen, I saw a man sat down eating a sandwich. Alright, so let's get this straight. For starters, there's this random person inside the house, and on top of that, he was there making food as well? I'm not sure, but it seemed like he didn't hear me, so I quietly opened the back door, and immediately I run across to the other side of the neighborhood. Once I was far enough, I get on my phone. Well, in summary, they found the man hiding in my room, where I guess he decided to take a nap. I have no idea how he got in there, and to this day, I'm glad I haven't seen him since. Number 10. I was 22 years old when this happened. and I was living in a rented home in a small town. The people that rent the home to me were always away for the most part. This meant the house was mainly to myself. It was nice. It felt like I had this house all to myself, minus having to pay a lot of money. Anyways, that's besides the point. For the past couple of nights, I've been noticing something strange. For starters, when I would return from work, I would notice a few things were different. Most notably, I would notice this small window would always be open. Now, in order to get to it, you would need a ladder or something, but since my ladder was inside the house, I found it odd that it would be opened. That was so weird. I know I would have closed it whenever I would leave the house, so why was it open? On the nights this would happen, I would call the owners, but they would tell me each and every time that they were nowhere near the house. Like I said, this happened a few nights, but in the end, I blamed it on the window just not closing properly or something. It seemed like that was the most obvious explanation in that moment. However, this time something else was different. I noticed there was a bunch of newspaper that was thrown all over the front yard, which I found strange. I never get the newspaper, so this was something odd. Now, yes, it could have been possible that some wind had pushed some newspapers around, so once again, I explained it with that. Even so, I made sure to check everywhere in the house, but everything was where I had left it. Nothing was taken, and everything seemed normal. Now on this final night, I returned back home, and I found that my front door was slightly open. Alright, well, let me think about this. The only people who had a key to my house were me and the owners. Unless the owners were behind this, then who in the world could have opened my door? Well, I knew one thing. I wasn't staying there any longer. In the end, I ended up staying at my cousin's house for the week, and I moved out a week after that. Since then, nothing else has happened, so I'm not sure exactly what was going on there. Awesome. Looks like you made it to the end. As always, I thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed those stories. So, tell me, which one was your favorite? Let me know down below. Also, if you have some stories you would like to submit, then make sure you send them my way. I would love to check them out. Now, yes, I know it's that part of the video where we have to say farewell, but don't worry, I'll be back again next time, so I hope I'll see you then. Until next time, friends, take care and have a wonderful day.